So now that you've watched the mini tutorial on how to work around in Blender, we're going to open up our project. We're going to hit open on our splash screen, or if you've already opened it, you'll see you have a column for recent files. So let's just go ahead and open the blend file. Now you have an option for day or night. We're going to open up the day file, which is not the locked file, but the open file. So we can move around and see some of the files and how everything is working. So now this should look slightly scary and slightly familiar. Remember, this is your camera view. So the file opens up to your camera view. You can zoom in with your mouse wheel. So when you open up the file, you will see everything in gray. This is called your solid view. The solid view is just keeping all of the materials, lighting, and everything out of the way, and all you're able to view is your objects. So right now, if you go up to the top right hand side, you'll see little circles. Those are world views. The first one is a mesh view, so you get an idea of the density of the mesh. The second one is your solid view, which is what you are opened up when you open up the files, what you see. The next one is your material view. Now this will give you a lower res view of the materials in your scene, but it's not the fully rendered view. So you can see here that it shows a little bit of the flowers, the textures, but there's no environmental view. So on that one, you have to click on your render view in order to see everything in full glory. However, this will take up a lot of space on your computer, and if you don't have a heavy graphics card or a powerful graphics card, it will slow down all of the processes on your computer, and this is why everything's in the solid view. So we're just going to stay in the solid view for now until we're ready to render out, and then we can see everything in full color. So one of the things you'll remember from the mini tutorial is how to customize your views. So if this view tab is open, you could just slide it over to the groove in the middle and it will disappear. You can also open it back up by toggling the little arrow. If you want to pan, you can use the hand symbol at the side of your screen. And we're in layout mode, so that much is the same. The only difference you'll see is that there is another window below it that is not the timeline. It's a different window. And that window is a graph editor. We don't really need to be concerned with it. So we're going to focus everything on the 3D window, which is your layout mode. So right now you can see that you have a lot of objects and a lot of geometry going on. Remember, in your collection view, you can see everything that is in a collection. You can toggle it on and off. You can hide it with the eye, or you can hide it with the camera. If you want to hide something from the render view, you use the camera toggle on and off. Right now in the scene, you've got 4 different cameras, which is what we're going to talk about just to help you get your render straightened out for the first time you're experiencing the scene. So you have 4 cameras. They are toggled off, and only camera A is active when you open the file. But you can go in and toggle the eye on, EYE, toggle the eye on and off, and then you'll be able to utilize the camera. So you can actually switch cameras. So we're going to just look at the camera A setting, which is what you have right now. So you can see the orange highlight is showing you that camera A is your active camera. If you go down to the properties for the camera, you'll see that you have depth of field already applied. You do not have to do anything to this unless you want to change the depth of field, and that is a little bit more advanced. So one of the things that we need to focus on right now is the camera settings and the object of the camera. So let's go through and look at some of the other camera positions and see how you can toggle them on and off. And remember, when you have a green highlight, it will also be green in the property data editor. We could just take a second and go through and just finish looking at all of the objects in the scene. Before we get to the cameras, let's go ahead and show you all of the different things that you have in the scene. So not only do you have cameras, you have lighting, you have buildings, you have the actual balcony set. And like I said, you can use the eye to toggle them on and off in your layout mode view. If you don't want it to show up in the render, then you click the camera. So here I'm just toggling things on and off, which you can do for practice. You can go ahead and just change the look or the amount of items in the scene this way. So if you just want the balcony with the beautiful sky, you can toggle the city buildings off. Right now I'm going to open up the second lighting mode, which is just additional lights so that the scene could be a little bit brighter. Initially it will be off, but you can toggle it on if you feel your scene needs more light. So now we have light coming from both directions in the scene. We won't be using this for a final render. We're only going to use the single light in the scene, the single light setup in the scene. So right now this is how bright it looks as you're rendering, but we're going to keep going into the folder and start setting up our cameras. So now back in the scene, we're going to toggle off that one light in just a sec. If you want to toggle off some of the buildings, or if you want things to look a little differently, then you have the flexibility in the open file to do that. You also have a fog layer, which should stay off if you don't need to see it in your solid view. It is in the render view because the camera is active. So in addition to depth of field, you also have some slight fogginess over the buildings in the area of your photo. So right now we're going to go ahead and create another collection, and we're going to rename this avatar. So after that, we're going to go ahead and go to File, Import, and we're going to bring in our GTLF. So once we have our avatar uploaded into the scene, there's no need to change anything here when you're importing the GLTF 2.0 file. Once you've got it in the scene, you're going to go ahead and add it to the collection. So there are two steps to add things to the collection. So once your avatar is imported, avatars are imported in a hierarchy system. So once you have your avatar, you need to go ahead and highlight it. So you're going to go ahead and copy your avatar hierarchy folder. So make sure you have select hierarchy, and you can go ahead and select the hierarchy, and then you can paste it into the collection folder. And that is the simple way to get avatars into their own collection. In order to delete the files, because you only copied them, you have to delete the hierarchy. There may be some files left over, but you can also just go ahead and delete them because you can see that your whole avatar is in your collection folder. So once your avatar is in the scene and in its own collection, which is easier to manage all of the assets for the avatar, you can go ahead and hit your material view, and that will give you a little bit more idea of which materials have been uploaded with the avatar. So you can go ahead and take a look at it and see if it is to your liking, if everything is uploaded properly. You can see that there is some shine, there is some texture, so that tells me that all of the materials have been uploaded. We can see that there's a lot of detail. We will look at materials in another part of the tutorial series. So right now we're going to go ahead and go into the render view so that we can see how everything will be rendered out with this camera view. So now you can see in the render view we have some these large triangles. They are called bones. In order to remove the bones, you need to go into the avatar collection, and then you can just click on the actual avatar mesh. This is where the bones live. So it's not in pose, it's not in armature. If you can see, the pose and armature don't have any visual toggle. So the only visual toggle is in the first hierarchy position. So you can go ahead and go to that hierarchy. That's where the bones live, but they're not able to toggle on and off. So in that first position is where you can click on and off on the eye symbol, and the bones will not be showing in your render view. So if you click off on the camera and off on the eye, when you go to render and render image, you won't be able to see any of the bones. Now checking our render, we can see that the initial default camera position is quite nice, and of course it's planned to be that way. But we want to see how we can get some more dynamic photos out of this render, and that's why it's packed with 4 different camera views for you to manipulate. So right now this render will probably take about 10 to 14 minutes depending on your angle, and that's due to the geometry. So now back in the scene, we can close our avatar collection, so we don't have to see all of the items in there. And we can go venture off into our next camera, which is camera B. So now if I open up camera B, if I open the eye on camera B and close the eye on camera A, then camera B will be the camera that I can look at, and I can just click on that, and like we know, it's going to show me the active camera. Once you click on that camera, it becomes the active camera. So now in my active camera view, I see that I have a 3/4 shot of my avatar, and this is quite nice. So I can go ahead and just render that as is, but we may have to move cameras around. So now let's take a look at camera C. So camera C and camera D are a little bit off on position on purpose. It's focused on her feet or on the bottom half of the garment, and that could be a nice view. But when we go to camera D, we can see that camera D is, let's call it the camera with the most opportunities. So camera D and camera C, you can move those and manipulate those to get your own special render view. So how do we do that? Being that there are so many items and so many different collections in the scene, the best way I found to move your camera view is to use your object menu and to use your camera menu to toggle on your camera millimeter view. So if we toggle on the active camera mode for camera D, we can see the properties below. We don't need any other items except for the properties in the object data view. So let's see what changes we can make. We already know that we have depth of field checked on. In order to move the camera and transform the position of the camera, we need to go to our X and Y location, X, Y, and Z location menu to move the camera. Now moving the camera is quite simple: up or down, side to side. Z is up, Y is front to back, and X is left to right. So we can use all of these things to create a view. We can also change the camera focal view. This is actually called the camera size in Blender, but it's measured like a camera would be measured by millimeters, and this is a measurement for focal. The higher the focal view, the more zoomed out the photo will be, but you can also zoom out the camera in the location menu using the Y axis. You can also move and pan up and down by the X and the Y, as you saw me just do, and then you can take a look at your render. Before you do that, make sure you save any previous renders that have been rendering while you work. I'm only saving it to my desktop for the purposes of this video, but save it in a good place. The files tend to get a little bit big. So now I am showing you that there is another way to change your camera angles. If you want to get more complex, you can use the gizmo to move the camera once you've highlighted the camera, and you can use the transform gizmo to move the camera up and down, side to side, and rotate it. However, I found in this file, in this particular file, that that does not give you the best result because you cannot see it due to all of the... I found the best way to do the camera angles is the way that we just went through, because you have more optical judgment and you'll be able to see it in the viewport as well. But this is a way to manipulate the scene. If you want to go ahead and start here, maybe you are looking at another area in the scene, and you can go ahead and try to angle it and get it to a point where you want to start your render. But then you can go to your camera view. You can see that it's not quite right, but you can then use the method that we just discussed in order to move it and to change some of your views. So this is the best way to do it while you have active camera in your layout scene, and rotate your camera using the object window, and you're able to see it a little bit better. If you want to move the Eiffel Tower into the scene, you can rotate it. You can zoom in and out to get the model in the actual place that you want the model to render. Once everything is done, we can go ahead and render our final result. So this is the final result. This render actually took about 6 minutes because there's less geometry in the view. So if that helps you, then the less geometry you have, the faster the render will be. Overall, the longest render was about 14 minutes. The graphics card does matter. I have a 3080 RTX NVIDIA card. So right now we're going to jump back in and we're going to render our third view. So that was camera D that we repositioned. So now we're going to go and take a look at we're going to toggle off camera D, toggle on camera C, and then we are going to take a look at the view of the render. And like we saw before, it is rendered at her foot. We're going to make the most of this angle by adjusting the object properties and the angle. We're going to try to get that Eiffel Tower in there. I love the Eiffel Tower, so I want to get it in every render. And then we're going to go ahead and just reposition the camera until we get a nice view. Here we will zoom out. We will use the focal length so you can see how we zoom out with the camera settings. So if I zoom in, that is a lower focal length. If I zoom out, it is a higher focal length. And now I am going to just tilt the camera up and zoom in a little bit, and then I will have my third render positioned. Like I said, using the object browser to manipulate your camera with a scene so heavy with geometry and so heavy with objects in the scene, this is the best way that I found to reposition the cameras and get another render scene done. So let's go ahead and just make sure that we are ready to render. I just want to get her shoes in there. I'm going to move certain things out of my way so I can see my render window. And now let's take a look at some final results. Very nice, very beautiful renders. There is more to discuss when using Blender with the various softwares, so stay tuned.